Free Academy podcast.
Let's do it over now because I think it just went live.
Hey everybody, I'm Andrew Bird. This is my first time doing a Free Academy podcast, and here I am. Right now, it's just me and Mike in here, and
And another friend who's
and another random friend who draws art.
drawing stuff. It's really cool. Like I don't know who it is, but I'm glad they're
Oh,
in here.
how do I make him
Um,
bigger? Oh, that's how. There we go. He's perpetually been on mute, he or she. Who knows? But
so
I'll
what
leave
did you
that.
want to talk about today, Andrew?
So I guess what came to mind is propaganda and how easily or difficult it is to convince people that something is true. Um, and this comes in the wake of all the everything you see on Facebook about the elections and how easily memes float around and how quick people are to quote things that may or may not be true, just a given a sentence that somebody may or may not have said. Um, and so I guess the first question I would have is how does one protect oneself against being subjected to or victimized by propaganda?
That's an awesome question. So a couple of things come to mind for me, and one is like how maybe the best strategy to protect yourself is to kind of try to reverse engineer the process and try to understand what cognitive biases people are using in propaganda when they're trying to manipulate us. Um, so it's funny because if you watch commercials, everyone's like, "Oh, the commercial is not affecting me. You know, it's working on everybody else, but it couldn't possibly affect me."
Right,
But obviously, they're not going to spend those millions of dollars if it's not working on even you. Yes,
right.
we're all susceptible to propaganda and manipulation. Um, but yeah, so that's I guess my best answer is to try to figure out like what what biases do I have and to understand that those apply to me too. Like I'm making mistakes left and right and predictably making mistakes. But if I can learn to predict how my brain might mess up, then I can have a level of security against bad ideas just being whatever pushed into my brain with some kind of emotional manipulation. Um, how about you? What strategies do you think are effective?
Well, so yeah, it's interesting you bring up commercials, and so the big ones. So it stands out for me with uh like the Super Bowl ads, right? So they
Hmm.
know during the Super Bowl that's when they have the most captive audience, or at least the broadest audience, right? Of any single event in at least in America. And so this year, I was in a noisy place. It was during Mardi Gras. I could barely hear, but there are a few commercials that were funny, blah, blah, blah. But I remember last year, one that stood out in my mind in particular was it was it was so it was like a dad and he had his daughter and it was kind of they only have 30 seconds or so but they go through and it started out with her as a child like an infant. He was taking her home from the hospital and then she grew up and she skinned her knee and he comforted her and gave her band-aid, blah blah. And then later on, she's 16 or 17, and she's at some party that she's not supposed to be at, and she
Mm.
calls him like distressed, and he goes to pick her up, and he's there to be the protective father and not criticizing her or anything like that. And then like the very end of the commercial, she's got to be in her 20s or something, and he goes to drop her off at the airport, and she has her military gear on, her camo, and he's dropping her off at the airport, and it's like he's such a great dad, so supportive of her with her through her entire life. And then at the very end of the commercial, it's like, buy a Camry. And it's like,
Oh,
what? What the hell
oh
does
my
a
God.
Camry have to do with any of that, right? And if you notice, like, yeah, when he drives to the party and when he drives her home from the hospital, yeah, he's driving a Camry. But that would have been just the most subtle little thing. But it was so clear to me, and like you said, I'm sure it was affecting me as well. If I wasn't, my my subconscious emotion towards the military probably aren't the same as what most Americans would be, right? But
Right.
but just like all these emotions of look how empathetic and protective he is and serving your country with the military blah blah and just generating all these emotions and then you just associate that with Camry, and then people want to buy, right? So I think that's a lot of what it is being aware of when you become emotional. That's when you should become the most skeptical. Um,
Yeah,
and
that's an
that's
interesting one. Sorry, go ahead.
no, no, yeah, that's, and it's hard and it's almost counterintuitive because people want to feel emotion, right? Like people do drugs and people go to movies and people go to you do all of this in order to feel something. But when it
They
comes to
fall in
making
love.
yeah,
We're
yeah,
talking on Valentine's
Valentine's
Day
Day,
here,
that's right,
so
right. Everybody wants to feel something. Everybody wants to feel. But when it comes to making decisions, at least from an economic standpoint, emotions aren't the best way to make decisions. Now, so that brings up another interesting point though too, I guess, is that if people are doing things only to make themselves feel the best, then maybe this whole propaganda thing from the point of view of the person doing the advertising, the propagandizing, they want to manipulate your emotions. But if the population wants to feel something, I guess who are we to say no, don't do that, right? I just thought of that just
yeah,
now.
yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, that's a really tricky one for sure. Like, what's the difference between like happiness and like whatever a heroin addict is doing? I don't. I said something about that in my book, and one of my good friends, Lewis Watts, gave me a good feedback on it that it's really not the same. And I was kind of silly to paint, drug abuse as like a way of chasing happiness because most of those people are often depressed. And like I understand that, but I got there thinking it's exactly what you said. If we're chasing a feeling and like, how is their feeling, whatever they get out of heroin, like how is that any worse than whatever somebody gets out of going to church or like,
Right.
falling in love or whatever.
Right.
Um, so totally, man. I don't have any way around the old subjective values issue.
Right. Right.
But
Yeah.
one of the interesting things you mentioned earlier, and I think fits in with propaganda, is more than changing our behavior, just the part of sticking in our memory, which is what you said. Like that commercial was the one that you still remember, like almost the entire plot from last year. Like,
Yeah.
how does that work? um,
Right.
and um, I think it happens the same way with lots of like Old Spice commercials, for instance. Like they don't say anything the entire time, but you
Yeah.
remember it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's right.
So maybe a big part of propaganda isn't even convincing people so much, but just purely that brand recognition. Like the word Toyota Camry,
Yeah.
right? And it's
That's right.
it's been refreshed in your mind. And it's
Yeah.
like the same with McDonald's or any of these people. Like they don't have to convince you to like it. They just want you to remember that they exist.
Yeah. That's right.
I mean, often they're trying to convince you to like it too, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, and that's actually kind of where the word comes from originally. I was looking this up right before, like the word propaganda comes from Latin, and it literally meant to spread or to propagate. So like
Ah.
a wave on water would be propaganda
Ah.
because it propagates, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I think that's where it still does fit in with this idea of things that are repeated. Like you just propagated that commercial to me, right?
Yeah.
You
That's right.
recounted it to me. So Toyota's winning because now we're talking all about Toyota and the
Yep.
Camry. So all of you should go out and buy a Toyota Camry if
That's
you love
right.
your country or your daughter.
And if you don't, then you're definitely well. That's so. I guess that was This is random. I didn't expect this to come up, but my boss at work, and we were just bullshitting around, not talking about anything serious. And he wasn't he's not like my mentor or anything, but we just kind of like had a conversation. And he asked me, he's like, "Do you know what a memory is?" And I'm like,
Hmm.
"Hmm." Never really thought like how to define a memory, like right, something you remember. Like, but what creates a memory? It takes two things. He said, an event and an emotion.
Hmm.
So with that camera commercial, as you say, like as long as they can elicit some kind of emotional reaction, then at least you'll remember. I guess that's what they're trying to do is get to an emotion so that at least you'll remember. And I remember so one of the books I read, it's called The Rational Animal by Douglas Kenrick. And what he's talking about was so we each of us as we go throughout life, each of us in general, we all have at least 7 different personalities, and these all serve an evolutionary purpose in order to help us survive and replicate. So when you're young, I'm not worrying about attracting a mate, right? When I say young, like 5, 6 years old, you don't care about that. But you need to learn about how to get along with others and how to navigate where you are in your own subjective social hierarchy, things like that. And then later on, you need to know how to cultivate relationships and maintain relationships and attract a mate. And then later on, how to foster a parenting relationship, like with your child. And so he was saying the point of his research was kind of like if you're able to associate your commercial or your brand with any of these at least 7 character traits, you're gonna have a lot better time. Number one, actually getting the point across to the demographic you're advertising to, and then getting them to remember and maybe act on what your advertisement was trying to get them to do. So,
Yeah, that
yeah,
reminds me of some advice I got actually after my book release party at Brave New Books. So it was, I mean, it was super fun, and I read parts of my book, and Jared Reyes was there, and Tyler Olson and Sean Skyped in. But anyways, I when I was reading my bit, I was kind of looking down and reading out of my book, and I glanced up a few times, but I had my eyes down. And afterwards, this guy came up who was like a stranger to me, and um, he said he really liked most of everything, and but he gave me this piece of advice for next time, like try to have that eye contact with your audience, because and he mentioned that same exact thing, that if when you make eye contact, you're making people feel an emotion, and that's when they'll remember things. So, and there's that great quote, like, people won't remember what you say, but they'll remember how you make them feel.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so I've totally been trying to employ that more often.
yeah.
um, Maybe we could talk about, can propaganda be used for good? Uh, like
Oh,
or and that's almost just as tricky as, like, how do you protect yourself from, say, negative propaganda or whatever. But,
yeah,
like, if you have good ideas, and if you're genuinely, like, want to help people or whatever, if you're a good guy, like, then you got to get the message out, right? Like,
that's
you have
right.
to try to propagate your good your ideas if you believe in them, right? It's no good if they're in your own head.
Right,
So I mean,
that's
that's
right.
something I've been trying to think about a lot, is like how to, and I mean, it's not like I'm right or anything, but like how to reach people, how to,
Yeah.
because we can't just let the banks and the fast food joints be the only propagandists.
Yeah, you're right about that. You're right about
um,
that. I wonder how. I mean, I think some of I mean, so the, I had to bring him up at least once during this talk, but Stefan Molyneux, um,
uh-huh.
one of the he did a podcast fairly recently, and it was about like, can you fight sophistry with sophistry,
Hmm.
right? And so I don't know, some people may be listening. Sophistry is like the idea of manipulating words and arguments that you may know don't make logical sense, or the data doesn't actually support it, but knowing that most people aren't going to bother to look up the data for themselves, or the flaw in the logic may be so subtle that most people won't notice it, you'd still use that argument in order to get a point across. And people do that all the time. I mean, if one thing that I was thinking about when I thought of this idea of propaganda is we were talking about gun control laws and how people will quote statistics on how many gun deaths there are, all this stuff. And so one thing I didn't know, which is apparently true, and again I haven't looked this up for myself, so guilty here. But whenever someone mentions gun deaths per year, and and when they do that, it's always almost always around the context of guns allow violence. Guns allow you to harm other people, and so in order to prevent that harm against other people, we should um, restrict the access to guns, which sounds at least like a logical argument on the surface. But that statistic of gun deaths, I'm told, always includes even suicides, right? So if you
Right.
include, and the number of suicides is greater than the number of violent homicides. And so if
Yeah.
you can say if someone wants to kill themselves, I mean, a gun may be an easy way to do it, but there's a million other ways, and it's not. If someone wants to kill themselves, who? I mean, this man. I guess there's no greater expression of free will and ownership of yourself than the ability to kill yourself, right? I mean,
Which
not
is
that
why
it's
the government makes it illegal.
right. Exactly, exactly. Um,
Which is so silly. Just, how can you ever enforce that, right?
right, yeah. It's almost ridiculous. But yeah, so I guess the point of using sophistry to combat sophistry almost the same as using, but I think in this case using the techniques that are demonstrated already by the advertising companies and people like that. We know they work. You know, you look at things like Thinking Fast and Slow and The Rational Animal and just evidence of what's working already.
Yeah.
It seems that the techniques in use now are super effective. And why not use them if you have a better or at least a different message that you honestly believe is true?
Yeah, so it seems like that was the main difference. You said at the beginning, sophistry is like using word tricks basically, but when you don't even believe them, or that you know there's a flaw in the logic
Right,
somewhere.
right.
Um, so yeah, maybe it is different when it's when you actually do believe in it yourself.
Yeah.
And plus, I actually think it makes the propaganda that much more effective. Like, because people can pick up on lying. Maybe not always, but um, if you can spread whatever you're trying to spread without lying, and I mean, you can still use these techniques like associating it with good concepts. I always try to show people how fun anarchy is. That's my
Yeah.
way of being a propagandist, is like because nobody wants to do something if it's boring or sad or depressing, but like
Right.
if you can show them like not only does this make logical sense, at least to me, but it's also allowing me to have more fun in my life. Like
Yeah.
who wouldn't want to do something like that?
Right, right.
um so yeah, I don't, and it has been weird though, because am like naturally I didn't really like being the center of attention too much, or like at least growing up, and never really enjoyed like giving talks in front of people or even being on video that much or anything like that. But then kind of in the past few years, I realized um, that yeah, it is an effective strategy, and putting a face to an idea is helpful to people because, like you said, they don't remember the things you say. They remember how you make them feel, and like faces and seeing somebody's eyes as they're telling you something like uh, just makes you that much more willing to at least consider it and remember it, and then who knows, maybe you go and tell somebody else that idea, and it just spreads and propagates.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I've been totally working on that stage fright issue, and now it's almost to the point where like I enjoy it almost and like crave it.
Yeah.
So it's mixed feelings still, but definitely come a long way. But I think it was easier because I wasn't seeking attention just for the attention. I was seeking attention for the ideas,
Right.
so it seemed more I don't know. I didn't feel bad about it, I guess.
Right, right. Well, that's so it was I had a experience kind of like that. I'm the same way. Like I don't like necessarily people paying attention to me and like being the center, the limelight and all that. It was weird. Like I was Skyping with my brother a few weeks ago now, and we were just bullshitting, playing video games, whatever. And I was scrolling through Facebook after we shut the game down, and some girl. Well, what it was a video of um, some kid. It was like a clip from Dr. Phil, and what was happening was because they were on camera for Dr. Phil, right? And it was like some child. He must have been, I don't know, 10, 11, and his mom. And he was saying like they were having an argument, blah blah blah, on camera again. And he was saying, "Shut up," to her. And he's like, "How does it feel? How does it feel when I tell you to shut up?" Right? And there were tears in his eyes, and he was emotional about it, man, because he felt bad. Like he could feel, like, look how bad it feels when you tell someone to shut up, you shut them down. And he even went over and like he like slapped her, not hard, like he's a 10-year-old. I guess they could hit kind of hard, but he like slapped her. He slapped her or whatever, and
Wait,
so it
Dr.
was,
Phil?
yeah, it was on the Dr. Phil episode. So because and it was just a clip, like a 30-second clip or whatever. But because he had the protection now of all these people watching him, she couldn't retaliate against him, and he could express the way how he had been evidently been being treated at home. And so
Mhm.
anyway, that was what happened in the clip. And then like someone had posted that, and like all the comments were below like, oh, if my kid did me like that, I would beat him to within an inch of his life. Like because that's just their reaction. Like, oh no,
Right.
I would hit my kids. No, you got to hit a kid so that they know what they're doing. And I'm like, the girl who posted this is not my friend. I mean, she's like a friend of a friend who I added on Facebook 4 years ago, right? Never said a word to her. But I'm on Skype with my brother, and I'm showing him this, and he's like, dude, if you think you have a better way, then you really have a moral obligation to at least say something. Like, cause she has kids and all that. It's like, listen, don't tell her how to live her life. Like, you're not an authority figure, but you at least have an obligation to say something. And so I did. Like, I just found a YouTube clip of, like the truth about spanking children. I just posted it. I was like, listen,
Yeah.
I'm no authority on the subject, but just here's something you might be interested in. And that she didn't like it. She didn't comment on it. I don't even know if she watched the damn thing. But yeah, I felt so nervous. Like I don't know why. It was like putting a link. What's the worst thing she's gonna do? Unfriend me? Like who cares? She's not even my friend. But I was so nervous about it, right? So I understand. Like I empathize completely with like not wanting to like be in
Yeah,
that
put
limelight at
yourself
all.
out
But
there.
yeah, but I
Right.
need to get more used to doing that. I need to do it more. It's weird.
Yeah, that's I the phrase you used there, that like if you have a better idea, then you have a moral obligation to share it. Now, I don't know if I don't like the idea of obligations, but I think if you really believe it, you might want to, like
Yeah, yeah.
different way
I
of
like how you
phrasing
didn't
it.
use the word should there. That was that was good.
Right? No, that's a tricky one. I try to avoid it. But
Yeah, it is.
no, I totally feel the same way that like yeah, and I could, be freer myself probably if I kept quiet about it, if I just yeah, I could go hide in the woods and nobody would ever find me and I could avoid all taxes. But like that's not the point. It's not just for me, If I'm experimenting with my lifestyle to see if this works, what I'm trying to do. But then it's also about sharing that. If you find a good solution, yeah, why not share it with your friends and neighbors and relatives and everybody? Um, whether it's, live lifestyle or raising children or investing or anything, like, yeah, if you really believe it,
Yeah,
then it almost would be hypocritical not to share it, I think.
right. That's right.
Um, yeah. So
Well,
that's
so I'd say,
interesting, though. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
it is. So what I guess one thing I wanted to get your take on because I
Yo, Eric Jew, how you doing?
good.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm here with Andrew Bird. We were just talking propaganda. Um, Bird,
So
what were you
Yeah.
saying?
so I was gonna I guess one of the things that came to my mind as I thought of this topic, and I think you posted on it a while back on Facebook, but like a skeptic's toolkit, like something to protect yourself against propaganda. So even us protecting against ourselves, like we may think this idea is so great, right? And we're fully behind it and sounds great to us, but as availability bias, confirmation bias, all these things. So how does one protect against other propaganda or even against your own propaganda? What tools could we use to protect ourselves against that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think another good one. So wait, earlier we said learning your own cognitive biases,
That's right.
and I think that's huge. And I think another one though is not being too committed to any of your beliefs
Yeah.
and being willing to give them up at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So that at least,
It's a weird place to be in, right? Like wanting to know, wanting to have passion around it, but still knowing that you could be wrong.
sure, sure. And maybe yes, that's where some of these things like I don't know. Rather than saying I know what's right, just saying I'm not convinced that
Yeah.
this thing that everyone's doing is smart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like whatever, using fiat money or like anything. It's like I can't tell you what the best currency is, but I can tell you that like I don't trust the dollar that much, and
Yeah.
uh, so it's the same way with I think religion or anything that we might be skeptical of that people use propaganda to spread is like um, yeah, just that ability to tell people, I don't buy it,
Yeah.
not yet at least, I'm not claiming it's not true, but I just don't believe it yet. And if you want to convince me, you have to do some more work.
There you
Um,
go. That's right. So I guess what I was thinking is there's probably some initial steps you can take upon any time someone puts forth a truth statement, right? So if I say to you, I like ice cream, okay, fine. There's no way for me to disprove that. If I like chocolate ice cream, there's I you can't disprove that. I mean, I can go get strawberry ice cream 10 times in a row, but I could still like chocolate, right? So let's dismiss opinions. But so anytime someone says a truth statement, something that's true about the world or has a bearing on you, I guess the first thing you would do would be to check if whatever claim they're making is falsifiable. That's step number one. So I was
Good start.
if I say everyone has three experiences in their life that characterizes who they are. I say, oh, is it precisely three? Is it at least three? Is it? Can you say
Yeah,
that
was
definitively for every person? Like, can I prove that statement wrong, or is that just kind of because it could be true? It's like who was it? Daniel Dennett with his phrase, the deepity, right?
oh yeah.
Where like love is just a word. Well, that's true. Love is a word, but love isn't a word, right? So
Yeah.
check the state if the statement is falsifiable. That's step one to determine if it even should be considered to be accepted as true. And then immediately after that, and this is what you posted on Facebook a while back, is immediately try to do the disproof by counterexample.
Yeah, okay. That's
That's
exactly
e-
what I was gonna say.
yeah, and that's easy enough to do in a lot of situations, right? And that's where
Anytime
that's
someone says the word all, I
yeah,
can
that's right,
instantly do it.
that's
Because
right, that's exactly
is there
right,
a single instance that isn't true? And
right,
then, boop, your whole claim is gone.
right.
Sorry. Try again. Next time, use the word most.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess that's what step one and two in my mind. Like even I think that's sequential, right? Like truth statement is put forth. Check if it's falsifiable. Check if there's counterexamples. I don't know if there's anything else that you can immediately do off the bat. Um,
Huh. Um, yeah, I guess maybe check for usefulness because I don't want to get caught up in an argument that has no application or like even possibly be ever useful to me.
right.
Um, but that's probably rare because most of the people talking about true propositions. Well, actually, no, I was doing one today that was kind of like that. I was arguing with this guy on Twitter about rights and whether we have any rights and whether they're objective or um, anything like that. And that was what I kept going to. I was like, it just isn't useful whether or not we do have rights. I can yell all night like, I have the right to water. I have the right to water, but that's
Yeah.
not going to get me any water.
Right. Right.
So what does it even mean? Like, is it useful? Because I think lots of people get sucked into debates about propositions that just like whether it's true or false, it doesn't matter because it's not changing your life in any way.
Right.
Um, so I don't know. How about you? Do you have any ideas for like ways to I don't know, or if somebody offers you an idea, how do you go through the steps of like determining if you want to believe it or not?
I I was trying to just listen in at first because I didn't know how deep you guys were in the conversation, so I didn't want to like just jump in right away.
No worries.
Um, but yeah, I mean, if someone says, I think I follow along the counter example is probably my first thing. Like what you said, I'm one of those
Yeah.
people who will listen to every single word that you say, and if you say one word wrong, then I'm like, oh, stop, stop.
Ha.
But I mean, at the same time, I think as humans, we should we should be precise, and we should also know that human error is always going to be there, and we're not robots.
Sure.
So you can also read between the lines, in order to achieve like a sense of like social, I guess, knowledge and understanding. If you're arguing with someone and you just pick apart every single one of their words, but you as a person know what they're actually trying to say, and maybe
Hmm.
maybe they're just too passionate, or
Sure.
they're just simply don't have the best vocabulary or something like that to be able to fully explain themselves, then
Yeah.
you as a
Yeah.
person should be able to, at the same time, maybe instead of correcting everything they say, help them along with what you think they're trying to get to, and that helps
Totally.
everyone. But
Uh,
as far as
I think that
propaganda goes, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
we talked about that. That just reminds me of another one of these Free Academy Lives we did on being a good reader, and it was kind of in the broader sense of like interaction. So, how to read a conversation and stuff like that too. And that was one of the things Tyler Olson put forth was this idea of giving people a charitable reading and like or charitable listen, where you don't go in with the idea that like I'm going to prove this person wrong. You go in with the idea that this person might have a nugget of truth in there that I could benefit from. Um, so yeah, I totally dig that idea that while we should be on guard a lot of times because people are going to try to trick us left and right all the time. Like it's just too easy and they're going to
Right.
do it. But people also have good ideas that they want to offer us. And if we're just turning down every potential idea, um, then yeah, we're not going to be any better off for that either. So it's probably some kind of mix of like, oh, that reminds me of this Aristotle quote. It's like the mark of an educated mind is the ability to entertain a thought or notion without accepting it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's
so
a
I think
good one.
that totally plays into like, if we're getting propagandized, go ahead and let your mind float with a thought, but don't attach any certainty to it until
Right.
you're or ever. But like maybe
Yeah,
you can slowly weight that belief a little bit stronger over time as you check it from more perspectives and like maybe it fits in deeper and deeper with your understanding of the world. Um, totally.
I think the idea that you should, I think that is exactly how you should act. And I think the habit of always trying to argue your point or disproving other people, I think that's interesting because that's kind of like a what came first, chicken or the egg situation with that specific habit. And I think our own, and not just our own, but other histories, governments on bipartisanship and splitting people up into two
Mm,
and
yeah.
dividing the population, depending on certain views. You always hear those sayings, there's two types of people in this world,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah, that's right.
that's so silly, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, I guess depending on what you're trying to say in the context of that argument, yeah. But I always think that's the funniest saying because that
Right.
is so
There are
not true.
7 billion types of
Yeah,
people.
yeah, exactly,
That's right.
Um,
exactly.
so I had
So
another idea of something we could talk about is maybe propaganda of the deed. Have you guys ever heard that phrase?
Hmm.
no,
No.
So it's this idea of doing something, and that is the propaganda in itself, rather than like a commercial or a flyer or email or anything like that. It's not content that you're trying to spread. It's you do some action and then people see that action and through that somehow they get this idea that you're trying to spread. So like for instance in V for Vendetta when he blows up the houses of parliament or whatever he blows up,
yeah,
that's called propaganda of the deed, and he was demonstrating the I guess the weakness of the state, or like at least its vulnerability, and like it's not this a thing that is can never be attacked. He showed people that yeah, you can blow up government buildings, and that was the propaganda in itself. And I was kind of trying to do something similar, like with the sailboat, showing people that I hated America enough to leave, or whatever,
Yeah.
or like hated the government at least.
Right.
And then living in the woods too, like trying to show like you don't have to follow the title system. So that's actually one of the forms of propaganda I really enjoy the most is like this idea of just doing something, and that in itself is the propaganda.
right.
Well, that's what
I don't know.
that's kind of one of the points I latched onto in just that part I showed Maddie with the structure of education in your book. And you were saying how the structure of how we go about educating our children, there's a whole lot more to instill in them what they want to instill in them than the
Yeah.
actual lessons being taught in the school, right? Which makes perfect evolutionary sense because language is very recent. observing actions has been around much, much longer than that, right? So yeah, the propaganda of the deed is everybody says, right? Action speaks louder than words, so makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And just that repetition of like, especially the repetition of the school environment where every single day you're sitting down, staring at the teacher, expecting knowledge to come at you. And
Yeah,
like just the placement of those people in that room, like that's what speaks volumes. But
right.
nobody picks up on it, like, or very few do, I guess, like you
That's
said.
right.
Yeah, it's kind of like, man, I totally had a thought and now I lost it.
Well, you'll never propagate it if you don't
Okay,
say it
yeah,
out loud.
that is in my mind the definition of propaganda, right? The spread of ideas. That's the difference between propaganda and advertising.
Hmm.
Instead of influence you to buy into a product, they're influencing you to buy into an idea. You know.
Interesting, because me and Andrew had talked the first half of this thing and kind of, I guess, used them synonymously. So that's really interesting that you bring that up. I hadn't thought about it like that before.
I
Yeah.
mean,
So,
they could be synonymous, but I think the actual definitions would be slightly different. Um,
sure, and different people have different definitions too. I'm on the Wikipedia page right now, and it says actually right here, defining propaganda has always been a problem. Real difficulties have involved differentiating propaganda from other types of persuasion and avoiding a biased approach. Blah blah blah. So
Hmm.
yeah, I don't think it's a settled thing, but
well,
yeah,
even if the two words have slightly different meaning, I think that the practices that go into each are almost the same. Um,
yeah, totally.
and and I think that our country specifically has become very, very good at one publicly and the other privately at the same time. You know what I mean? America and its advertising are huge. I mean, there's freaking like TV shows based on it, like Mad Men, and then we sit there and think,
Right.
oh, well, the private sector is so good at advertising, so but the government would never use those practices on us as people. That would never happen. They would never do that. That's just silly.
Yeah, they're there to help us.
Yeah.
Or so
I don't
we've been
want
trained to think after 12 years of government propaganda.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, that's cool. Hey, what do you guys think? Maybe if I can close this down since it's getting a little bit long, but then we can hang out and chat for a bit longer. I just know all our videos have been going long, but
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah,
thanks
let's shut it
everybody
down.
who's tuned in. If you want to watch more of these videos, you can subscribe to the Free Academy's YouTube channel. We also have a blog, I guess, at freeacad.com where anybody's welcome to create an account and post anything of interest. And if you have an idea for one of these talks, feel free to reach out to us. Andrew came with this idea for propaganda, and I thought it was really cool. And so, yeah, you can even be the host if you come up with the idea. So uh, feel free to join the cult. All right, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Thanks, Eric and Andrew. See you guys.
All right.
Bye.
Yeah.